Thank you everyone for coming today. It's nice to see so many lovely faces in the room. I'd like to welcome you to the Alive National Centre for Mental Health Translation's June edition of the Ready, Set, Translate series. These sessions bring us all together to chat about mental health research and findings and how we can translate them into our practice. I'm Hayley Purden. I'm one of the co-leads for the Lived Experience Research Collective, and I'm joined by Beck Cooper, who's also one of our co-leads. We're both PhD students. Beck's studying at the University of Melbourne, looking at the role of sleep and sleep-related behaviours on brain development and the implications that this has for psychopathology, particularly during adolescence. And I'm doing my PhD at the University of New England and looking at the way that people with lived experience of suicide participate in suicide prevention. So the Lived Experience Research Collective is pleased to be hosting this presentation today on work that for me personally has had a huge impact on the way that I do my lived experience work and advocate for change. This work has come from South Australia's Activating Lived Experience Leadership Project, and it presents a model of leadership, lived experience leadership. And over to you, Beck.
Great, thank you for that wonderful introduction, Hayley. I'm just going to begin with an acknowledgement of country. I'd like to acknowledge, for me, I'm presenting on the lands of the Wurundjeri peoples, who are the traditional custodians of this land. And if you feel comfortable, you're more than welcome to share where it is that you are meeting from today, whose lands you are on. And I'd also like to pay my respects to the elders present and past of the Kulin Nations, and extend that respect to other Indigenous people who might be on meeting with us today as well.
And at the Alive Centre, lived experience is core to the work that we do. And I know it gets said a lot in this space, but at the Alive Centre, we actually really mean it. Today, we recognise the wisdom and contributions of those with lived experience to the way that we talk about and address mental ill health in our communities. If you have lived experience, you're very welcome here, and I personally thank you for your contribution to the work that we do.
Just to provide a quick centre update, so the last quarterly forum we had across the Alive Centre was on June the 8th, and you can hopefully see some lovely faces there in a little screenshot that we took. The next forum will be in a few months' time on September the 13th.
And at the Alive Centre, we have 4 networks that you might like to join if you're not already a member of them. You can join more than one of them. You don't have to pick just one if you qualify for the different networks. The Lived Experience Research Collective, which is the group bringing the presentation to you today. There's 170 of us at the moment, and this number is growing on a daily basis. The Next Generation Researcher Network, 191 members. The Co-Design Living Labs, which I think is the oldest one of our networks, has nearly 2,000 members, and 54 members of the Alive Collective. So we're a growing group of people that are really passionate about all things mental health research and translation.
Just to give you a quick breakdown of where our members are, I guess, meeting from, or where they're located, you can kind of get a gist of where things are at from there. But obviously, we've got a majority in Victoria and New South Wales. But again, as Hayley said, this is growing literally on a daily basis. We've been updating those member tallies as we go.
When it comes to the Lived Experience Research Collective, we're a really welcoming space for people with lived experience who work in research spaces, just to come along and discuss topics that are of importance to us and meet others in the space. The collective is open to all people with lived experience who are enrolled in university high degree programs, and all researchers at all stages of their career who identify as lived experienced researchers. I've found the collective meetings and catch-ups of huge value to me in my own work, and it just, having a collective makes you feel a little less alone in this space where we can sometimes be all by ourselves. So it's worth joining if you'd like to.
This slide just kind of gives you an overview of some of our co-leads who are, I guess, leaders, or I guess contact people, if you like, for the Lived Experience Collective, and we're led by Associate Professor Michelle Banfield.
And recently we've developed an orientation to applied research for people with lived experience who are doing research type activities, including design, implementation, and other kind of researchy activities. The collective has helped guide the development of this, and we're hosting the first one on the 18th of July over the day from 10 to 4:30. So quickly take a screenshot or scan the QR code if you're interested in learning more about this or getting involved in the course.
Fantastic. So that's all the introductory slides from Hayley and myself. It's now my absolute pleasure to introduce our speakers today. So our first speaker, I believe, will be Mark. Mark Loughhead is a lecturer and lived experience researcher within the Nursing and Midwifery program at the University of South Australia. His work aims to promote lived experience perspectives relating to personal recovery and person-centred care, and how mental health supports and systems can be redesigned with lived experience leadership and consumer and carer perspectives. Mark is a research leader within the university's mental health, suicide prevention, research and education group, and he contributes to research and education projects, both within and across lived experience and other disciplines. Mark's background includes over 25 years of experience in community mental health education, consumer advocacy, and community development.
And joining Mark is Ellie. Personally, I'm a big admirer of Ellie's work, so it's my pleasure to introduce her to you today. If you don't know Ellie, when I speak to people about the work that comes out of LELAN, the group that she founded, they always say, oh, that Ellie, she's doing fantastic work. I really, look up to the work that she does. So so Ellie is the Executive Director of LELAN, which is the peak organisation in South Australia for people with lived experience of mental distress, social issues or injustice, and huge congratulations for getting that peak status. I know that was a recent thing. That's really awesome, and I'm waiting for you to become a peak for me in the ACT as well, please. Or maybe branch out into other states, because the work that gets done that you'll hear about is really fantastic work. You can read the rest of Ellie's bio there. I'm not a fan of reading bios, but I suppose now it's time for us to stop talking and to hand over to Ellie and Mark.
Beautiful. Thank you for that intro, Hayley and Beck. For those, I'm just going to share screen and I'll just move things around. Just on the peak stuff, super exciting that federally they're going through a process to get consumer and carer peaks. And so we'll watch that space. LELAN will not be entering that. And then the other jurisdictions around the country will continue to have their state and territory peaks. So hopefully people can see slides now. Yep, thumbs up, thank you. And I will do, where is my thingy? I can't find the thing I need.
On the bottom right.
No, it's not giving me access to my PowerPoint thing. That's okay, I just reduced the thumbnails. So I'm Ellie and I'm joined by Mark. We've been in partnership together for a few years now, since 2019, and when LELAN became an organisation, and this was our first funded project, and really happily collaborated with UniSA that continues. So I will do a quick acknowledgement so we don't lose all of our time. I'm up on beautiful Nadgerry country in the Clare Valley in South Australia, and Mark's on Kaurna land. And we also recognise people with lived experience, and LELAN's position around lived experience is that it is a place of pride and power and necessity that our system needs, but also acknowledging that even when we're confident, strong survivors, there's an edge of pain that lives within us, and when we come to tables and present as well, that we can't get away from. It's always living and lived within us at those times. Before we start, and I'll go through this much quicker, but something LELAN does when we present and hold spaces with people is just to invite people to consider the language you use. We hear from our communities all of the time that the words and how people define, and having the power to self-define taken away is really impactful for people. And so this is a resource we co-designed with community 4 years ago, 3 and 4 years ago. We did it over 2 years with people. So my story and distress are unique, contains strength and survival. The language needs to reflect the complete story is something that someone told us about why words are so important. So later on, we will have discussion. We just invite consideration. Something else LELAN talks about is we create safe enough spaces so that for this conversation in chat and orderly with words is how we create relationships that are safe enough. My body and lots of people's bodies tell them in the lived experience community that they never feel safe. So it's how we make it safe enough to be who we are on this day, in this moment, together to share what we need to. And not taking anyone's responsibility or power away from them, but enabling them and empowering them to do that themselves. And it's about bravery. I'm going to say some things that you may disagree with. That's all cool. We don't need to agree. It's a proposition based on our research and co-design efforts. And we're always evolving and thinking and rethinking in this space, and even how LELAN thinks about things and what we contribute, because we learn more and we grow more and we theorize differently about things. And so you may want to use chat. We won't make this interactive now, we will later. But if there's a thought or question you have about lived experience leadership for you, your role, your organization, however you come at it from, if there's something that you really want to know about it, because we can try and cover off in some way, or just to know for us to address in our work in the future, or how you like to engage around lived experience leadership. So if there's...
I can't actually remember why we were thinking next, but it just crossed my mind. I thought I'd try.
oh, there we go. Yeah, so put it in chat will be great. Thoughts or questions, what you really want to know, and how you like to engage with it. All right, and I'm just going to move my chat box over. And I'm going to move on whilst you do that, and I will review it as we go. So Mark's going to speak now about our work together.
Thank you, Ellie, and hi everyone. It's really good to be here and present on this work. So really proud of this work, and to work with LELAN and the concept of this project, and then to be able to do that with community was a really special thing for me. So just like to start by acknowledging that this was a collective work, and it happened, as really in the community with lived experience leaders and with sector leaders as well. And just we really acknowledge that collective effort with the project team, Nicholas and Heather, all our members of our project advisory group, and everyone who contributed. When you see the model, you'll see that the language in it isn't just our language; it's actually shared in terms of some of the language and phrasing that people shared to the project. So LEL, we called it Activating Lived Experience Leadership. It's a partnership between LELAN and UniSA's Mental Health and Suicide Prevention Research and Education Group. It was really it was a participatory action research project that it was much about research as it was capacity building and the community and social sector. So I think Ellie's initial conception of the project was really important, that it's a systems level work for embedding and enabling lived experience leadership to thrive and have impact. So that's that focus on the system was really important to have that. And one of the methodologies we learned from the philanthropic sector in the US, and just like to also acknowledge this project was funded by Faye Fuller Foundation in South Australia, which dedicates a lot of funding to mental health. We used a model called the 6 conditions of systems change, and that really helped us to conceptualize that change needs to happen across multiple points of systems, including policies, practices, how resources flow, knowledge, money, power, relationship dynamics, understanding all those things. And I guess at the bottom of that level is mental models, I guess the mental models of the sector and what's embedded in culture is what we're aiming to shift. And to do that, we need to have activity addressed all elements in terms of seeking a way of framing transformation, but then also acting as we went. So there's a great quote here that, if we work on the program level, we might help people beat the odds, but we really wanted to work on systematic interventions to help people change their odds and help people change their journeys. So really much about organisations coming together. So just to talk a bit about the research and the capacity building aspects. We're going quite fast here, but I'll keep up. Well, we can go to the next one. So participatory action research is often seen as a spiral, of collecting data, of starting where we're at. So, 2019 was really mapping where we're at, mapping the networks, mapping the themes, looking at policy, and then, starting to take action and do planning and do reflection. So having cycles of that through the action research process. And sort of a big part of that story was looking at the value proposition of lived experience leadership, being able to define that and being able to share that and have people buy into that and connect with it in a really fundamental way. So, because we knew that bringing people together is what creates, helps to generate action and shared understanding, and from there, shared commitment as we planned. So we saw this as insider research in a way, qualitative insight of the leads of Ellie and I working from that perspective, which was really important because we saw that, obviously around lived experience, but we didn't have a lot of leadership research coming from that direction. And we sought to sort of work in ways that brought players together to have collective impact. And that's actually another methodology also that you can read about for systems level change. So I might just go to the next one now. And the way we conducted the research aspects was to do focus groups with lived experience leaders. And we had a series of initial focus groups and then follow-up focus groups, and then an online forum where people could reflect on the themes and the analysis that was coming through as we went. And we worked with a really diverse group of people, which was really important to work with members working in suicide prevention, members of the queer community, people in different aspects of disability or different life contexts as well. And just so we would have a broad focus and help to have an intersectional focus. We also did a survey, which was at the later stages of the project, which was national. And it was mainly a qualitative survey to try and get some broader perspectives in too, and invite people to connect from other states and settings. And we had 14 interviews with sector and service leaders from their perspectives as well. We also, alongside of that, did consultations, and 2 key events were summit level meetings, which were half-day events to, I guess, set up the framework for the project and key initiatives, and be able to look at, I guess, across a time period, what was important to work on, and then do the research and the action, I guess as the research findings came out, to come back to a summit level meeting to inform that, to choose some key directions for South Australia. So, and the summit meetings are really well attended. Probably had about 100 people over both of those to really, and they were the key leaders in South Australia who attended. So I might just keep going. The types of things we talked about across all three of those data processes or ways of working to talk with people about their experience was around defining lived experience leadership, sort of identifying the qualities, skills and actions that we see that are effective. Really interesting one was looking at the key messages that people share. And we've still, really need to publish from that, because the breadth of key messages is really amazing to work through when you see it. And the challenges and barriers, which are pretty common, and what many of us know a lot about those, and they are replicated through many studies. Culminating, the most important one is around what lived experience leadership needs to thrive and have impact. So looking at sort of systems level actions to enable that to happen. And the way we communicated those were through mind maps. And this is an example of one of the early ones, where we would identify main themes and communicate those to people, and then seek reflection and seek sort of further depth of understanding as we went. And they worked right across the LL project, not just in the model of lived experience leadership, which we're talking about today. So LL was really a really broad process, and the model was one product of that. And the other work is represented in a document called the Roadmap for Systems Change. I think that's probably a quick summary. I think Ellie's saying there's other products that describe the process, and there's also an academic paper on the model as well, which came out, which was published mid last year, which if you really want a paper that describes this model, that's probably the go-to on that. So I think it's probably time to hand back to Ellie around lived experience and strategic work.
Thanks, Mark. When we went into this piece of work, we had this dilemma at the start, because you need to contextualize this, that this was occurring in 2019, which 4 years ago, to talk about lived experience leadership, it was less common, less included in policy or comment on policy. It was really low level stuff. And so we, in trying to design research and co-design activities for lived experience leaders, we were very reluctant to actually define what a leader was and who we would hear from. So it was self-defined. But throughout time, and because it is a contested space, it's really important that we do declare how we make sense of lived experience. And it was really timely that in 2020, Louise Byrne and Wykes put out an article that gave really solid defining parameters around lived experience, and LELAN adopts that, and through LL we adopted it as well. And so when we speak of lived experience at LELAN, we define it as personal experiences of mental distress, social issues, or injustice that have caused life as we knew it to change so significantly we have to reimagine and redefine ourselves, our place in the world, and our future plans. So the second part of that in italics is from the article from Byrne and Wykes, and LELAN does the mental distress, social issues, or injustice. We used to just talk about lived experience of mental health issues, but when you take a truly social determinant, trauma-informed approach, we broaden our lens to be more inclusive of distress. And you may or may not hear this in the circles that you move, but there are some calls that, well, everyone has lived experience. And the reality is, yes, life is complicated. We all have our moments, but it's important. And LELAN increasingly speaks to lived experience expertise, because it's a technical skill set unique in its own right that needs valuing and recognition. And so drawing on the Byrne-Wykes article again is the italics bit. So lived experience expertise is the application of our lived experience for the benefit of others. That's the change-making stuff, and it's also linked to the consumer movement and the values and history of that. There's a justice component that having a lived experience doesn't necessarily give you access to, connection to, understanding of, or promotion to make things better around that. So it's really important. And within this, as allies to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander communities, there's also work that's been done in this space where there's a particular recognition of the ongoing impacts of the history of Australia and colonisation and systemic oppression that continues for our First Nations communities. And so the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Lived Experience Centre, which is attached with Black Dog, have done work in this space, and they look at those ongoing negative historical impacts and specific events. And what this definition and frame of thinking also gives us is about bringing in the more broader social emotional well-being elements, and also family and community, whereas other definitions and approaches can be quite individualistic, so it's more encompassing around that. And so the model of lived experience leadership that our work was on, that took 2 years to develop and create and put into the world, this is what it looks like in the end. Through our research and co-design and talking to people, the bottom blue, stays peer, shares power, is the positionality that we discovered around lived experience leadership, how you come to this place and what is most critical for how you show up and the presence that you bring. The top 4 blue elements are the values, and these are very aligned with peer work practice, which is great that it all validates and builds on and is supported by those things. So integrity, authenticity, mutuality, intersectionality. And when we were doing this work as well in 2019, all of the writing, the visibility, presence, and thinking was very one-dimensional white. And so we intentionally built in an intersectional and diversity lens into our work, because that's important for Mark and I as the chief investigators for this work and wanting to contribute and expand the space. And the purple and teal are the 6 core skills, attributes, and characteristics of lived experience leaders that came from our research. The top one, centres lived experience. You think, well, duh, that's a bit obvious. It is, but we can't take anything for granted that when we're talking about lived experience leaders, that they actually are centering lived experience. Because as we see higher level roles and more people feeling safe enough to declare lived experience, again, they may have lived experience, doesn't mean they're utilising it or applying it, doesn't mean they're bringing that expertise. So we need to really make the obvious explicit sometimes, not just implicit. Core to being a lived experience leader is standing up and speaking out, nurturing connected and collective spaces, leading change, mobilising strategically, and championing justice. And so a bit more detail of these, and this is available at the URL I shared before, lelan.org.au/ALEL, which is ALEL. So centering lived experience, some of the core things here is staying true to recovery values and the peer movement, recognising strength in vulnerability, standing up and speaking out with courage and conviction. We're not just going rogue and making it about ourselves. There's some perceptions that people with lived experience they're only speaking for themselves, but lived experience leaders need to be connected beyond themselves to networks, to literature, to a broader landscape to have impact at the higher or more strategic and systemic levels. It's about standing tall and being out. Like, we can never run now. Mark and I can never run from our CVs or future roles we'll have that we have lived experience. And there's certain dilemmas that come with that as well. It's the championing justice, so recognising and speaking to power. And it's not just about speaking truth to power, it's about speaking truth no matter what, and recognising the places of power and where we can remedy and wield it ourselves, where we can get out of the way and give power to other people in the lived experience community that may not have the access that we do. It's challenging stereotypes, discrimination. It's making calls all of the time. We need to co-produce this. Like we don't need to be constant told anymore. It's the connection. It's the notion that we're stronger together is the connected and collective spaces. It's empowering others. It's looking at the intersectional experiences that we have. Mobilizing strategically is through networks. Look, being allies to others in our community, those that are less heard, those that get less access and opportunity, those who are more discriminated against and harmed by our systems and services. How do we, as lived experience leaders, if you come from that position, how are you looking at who is less than you in our community and how you can support the amplification of their voice, needs, rights, preferences as well? And it's really working for the big picture and long-term change. Systems change and radical change doesn't happen overnight, and it won't even happen in 12 months. So how are we going to sustain ourselves through this is really important considerations. And it's with that change and the system being really hard that we feel we're hitting our head against all of the time, is how we keep communicating in respectful, helpful ways rather than adversarial that limits our influence and potential. We don't settle for the status quo. It's also recognizing that not everything out there is always bad or that is everyone's experience. There's diversity within our community, and we need to lead change broadly, collectively, leaving no one behind and choosing the issues that we take on. And lived experience leadership is very self-reflective. We need time and space because we are giving so much of ourselves all of the time to stop, reconnect with why, find our posse to help sustain us. And organizations, I think part of the challenge, because it is a social movement and it is based on connection, is that they don't own us. And we need to be given time and space to connect with others, because that's how we do our job best, when we bring the collectivity to it. And some things from our model for lived experience leadership, it's leaders speak up to influence community awareness, organizational culture, policy and politics, creating space, pathways and inclusion with others, and prompting and supporting change. We connect our personal, professional and socio-political worlds in unique ways, which I think is really cool, that I get to come to work and bring all of the bits of me, but that's our challenge as well to others, but that's the beauty of it. And we also have a recognition within lived experience leadership that our individual contributions are always built on the shoulders of others, and they pave the way for who leads with us today and after us tomorrow. So how are we building and mentoring down and across our community and spaces as well? And Simon, I'm just noticing carers lived experience. So within our work, we broadly use lived experience to apply to consumers and carers, because who you are as a leader and how you develop and grow doesn't change. But when you sit at tables, the perspective and contextual experience you have will be different and should be declared, because they are different some of the time, particularly in the most pointy edges where rights are breached. And so this is a bit of a diagram just to delineate between lived experience expertise and lived experience leadership. All really important, all build on each other, but separates. And some caveats around this is, hopefully, based on what I've shared, is that no, not everyone has lived experience expertise. You may have gone through stuff, you may have lived experience, but if you aren't bringing in all of those attributes within the model that we've just talked about, then you're not a lived experience leader. And if you're not applying your lived experience for the benefit of others, then it's not expertise either in the way that we are meaning, where lived experience is a technical skill set and it's a discipline of its own. Consumers and carers are not the same. lots of shared experience. We need to be alongside, supporting, advocating with each other, but we have unique perspectives and we both deserve our own space and place of empowerment to speak up about our own rights, needs and preferences as well. Lived experience reps and peer workers are different. Some organisations think, oh, we've got peer workers, we'll just ask them, and so we can tick lived experience off. No, not the case, because peer workers may feel compromised. They may not have used those services or the environment that those services are provided. Need to be looking at double layers. Designated roles are vitally important right now and cannot be diluted. We need to bring intersectional lived experience. A white woman's experience of hearing voices on the street will be different to drawing on stereotypes here and just to make the point, but a Black man on the street hearing voices, if police are called, the potential threat of harm or coercion for that person will be different. So their experiences of services will be different, and we need to look at those layers. And a leader with lived experience is not a lived experience leader. I have been a leader in my community and workplaces over many years for a long time, and I always had my lived experience. I did not center it at those times. The burden, the responsibility, the pressure that I felt is not what I do now as a lived experience leader, where I can't get away from it, where there's expectation, where there's responsibility, particularly that I feel as a very privileged person in this space. They're not the same, they're different. We need to talk about that. And I'm not going to do it now because it's too long. But in Melbourne in August, I'm talking, and that is the title of my talk at the Collaborative Centre stuff, just to get that on the agenda more. And so some questions for you, Mark.
Thanks, Ellie. Yeah, when we've done this talk, and we've done it a number of times, we would like to open up discussion. So, you know, what do you recognise about aspects of the model in the work you do, and how you see yourself contributing to change, and maybe some points around your collective vision for lived experience leadership. And, you know, I think the model really does offer that powerful process for reflection as we go. So if we think about those questions, we'll turn to them. We'll sort of have the remainder of the session talking about them as we go. But I thought I might sort of offer some reflections as well in terms of the research space. If we go to the next slide, Ellie. I guess when you're operating in a designated role in a university context, there's a whole range of complexity in that, in terms of finding your place, finding your lens and positioning, and what works for you and what works for the movement as well, and connecting with the themes of lived experience and what needs to change, and the values in that as well. And I'll just make that the point that you can see that in mental health research, it's become sort of transdisciplinary. So how do we sort of look at lived experience as a discipline alongside of others, but in one that's really quite different as well, and offers a whole lot of unique contribution and value for that. So, and our lens and positioning around what lived experience led research is developing, and there's quite a strong body of writings there, and there's an academic work in MAD studies, which really contributes to a lot of the critical theory that can help us. I think one of the important things for anyone's is the sort of idea around designated roles and the positional power and accountability that's important in them. So I'm in a designated role, and that helps me around my positioning. Really, yeah, I see it as really fundamental for the work I do. And it means the speaking position I come from is a lived experience one. I've got a background where I did a social work degree many moons ago. Worked in community health, in community development. So, you know, the lens are different in what positions and organisational roles that you take on. So, So what we're seeing across Australia is a lot of people stepping into academic roles and PhD projects in particular, where it takes some time to work through, I guess, your journey around lived experience and how you want to call that project or what you want that project to look like. And I see that. So that, you know, I guess it's a really encouraging conversation to move into seeing your work as lived experience led and what that means in terms of the boundaries around that. And I think the model is really, that the theme of rebalancing power is really about how we do academic writing, how authorship works, how setting priorities works, and project commissioning, all those things. We're starting to see really positive examples of lived experience led or co-designed approaches that really define that, because I think one of the things we need is clarity, so that we can sort of move forward, and we establish pathways and lived experience research pipelines for strengthening that, because that clarity helps us communicate clearly, and we need to do that in academic environments and in lived experience environments too, because evaluation and research isn't just in universities, it's actually in the community and across those partnerships, really. And probably one of the things I just reflected on the model as well is we had this theme of lived experience leadership is inside and outside of organisations and roles, so it's across. And you know, if you're working in a health setting, in a health research setting, it's also right beyond health. You know, public health perspectives have this interventionist type of idea, and it tends to take the primary focus, whereas lived experience is a critique often of that interventionist way of thinking and writing. And you know, in some ways that often strips away agency and power. So we look right beyond that, and lived experience is actually social and community as well. But I won't talk too much longer. I'll hand over to Ellie for your reflections, Ellie.
Thanks, Mark. And in thinking about what I would contribute about my experience as a lived experience leader, is I do sit in a bit of a unique position, having leading an organisation from nothing, just an idea in my brain and through conversation with others. And also some of my experience is different because of leading an organisation and being right on the edge and the first and only in a space, but then having connections elsewhere. And then some of the challenge of when you have a public profile in your state and nationally as well, and the added dilemmas and challenge around that. And also when I'm using my lived experience, not in a relational aspect of one-on-one or one-to groups in peer support role, but in a real systems change, highest level way. And I think the journey around that is, we recently had our launch because government finally in SA recognise us as peak and give us some core money for that after a long, hard fight. And I said that LELAN and my journey has been the worst and the best and the most painful and the biggest privilege I've had in my life. And I think lived experience leadership and living on the edge, it is all of those things, or it has been for me. And I always reflect and think, well, how do we make it easy for who comes next? And by paving the way we should, and that's why we do it, because it's for the benefit of others, not ourselves. And sometimes people may cast us as it being about us. But because it is the social movement, it can't be about us as well. So in our practice and in our action and in our words, how are we always bringing back those core elements of lived experience leadership is what I think. And there's this nice quote that around systems change that I really draw on, because some people want a cookie cutter, like how do you be a lived experience leader and how do we take on the system and what do we do? And for me, this quote really captures it, is that there's actually no blueprint for how to bring about systems change, and it is certainly not an easy thing to do. Changing the way systems operate requires vision, persistence, and in some cases, luck. At its core, it's about maximising social impact with the resources available and thinking strategically about problems and solutions, always solutions, while setting aside personal and institutional interests. And when I revisited this quote, it really captured what I think is most critical to my own action and words and influence and what I try to do in practice. And Mark, are you on this or you want me to?
Thanks, Ellie. One of the other products was we needed a vision for South Australia, and this is a part of a vision statement that we wanted for a consensus statement that everyone connected with and would take into their organisational leadership. So, and it's beautifully written. And I think, yeah, it's just so important that lived experience leadership is embedded, and it's really a dynamic which leads change, ensure that language and power and mind shift beyond the biomedicine that we have in place today. That's quite, that's the grounding of really the public system. So the focus on rights and giving control to people to determine their own lives and authentic co-design are the essential foundations of the changes that we seek. And services that are where people are valued and compassionate care is standard and accountability exists. So these are the themes, and that was our vision. It's really important that we hold that and we act on that as we continue this work. So yeah, it's a good place to end our talk and go into the discussion.
Thank you so much to you both for sharing that presentation. I know the work really well, but I learned something new from that presentation, so I really appreciate you taking the time to go through that with us. We've got a little bit of time for some questions before we have a lived experience reflection.